Years of accusations, decades of abuse, and one unprecedented investigation. In November 2009, Ireland's Murphy Report exposed the extent of one of the worst scandals ever to hit the Catholic Church. The report found the Archdiocese of Dublin covered up widespread sexual abuse of children, and instead of punishing the offenders, bishops protected paedophile priests by moving them from parish to parish, and even sending them to the United States, all to conceal their secrets and sin.
The reason the church here had such a grip on the people, I think, and such respect for it was, we went through 700-800 years of being ruled from Britain. And they made it a criminal offence to be a Catholic. You could be executed if you were a priest. And the people just fought so hard to hold on to their religion. And that's why, in a way, that we lost, I think, sight of the bigger picture. Nothing has happened in this whole saga that hasn't been brought to the fore by victims. As a young child, I was very devoted to my church. In those days, everything was very black and white. Either you were going to go to heaven or you were going to go to burn in hell. Quite scary, really, to a small child. This picture here was taken, I think, the day after my first communion. I was quite a skinny little thing. This is just a sort of portrait my father was doing when I was about 11 or 12. It was just after I'd made my confirmation. I was taken into hospital to have an operation, and I was really quite an ill child for 2 or 3 weeks. And he came around, he was the chaplain, and he came around to visit it the first day I was there, and he came into my room and said hello and chatted a little bit to me, and was very friendly. I suppose as a child I thought of a priest something not quite human, you know, something a little bit above human, like that there was something saintly about him. He would come about 10 o'clock, and he used to read me from a book called The Secret Garden. It's about a little girl who has this key to this secret garden that nobody else knows about. So I think that was sort of part of the secrecy thing, you know, part of the manipulation. And then he would tell the night nurse, to go off and get a cup of tea for herself. This picture here is the picture that my abuser took in the hospital. As you can see, I'm not looking too well. I'm not looking too happy either. He was actually guilty of digital rape, which is he was invasive. Every time I told him what he was doing was wrong and I wanted him to stop, he would say, I'm a priest, I can't do anything wrong. Eventually he took a very, very abusive photograph of me, and that was really, I think, the hardest part of the whole abuse. He came to hear my confession the day after he'd taken this photograph. I lay there and I thought, this awful thing that I had let happen, I've got to confess it. I've been so bad. And I thought, if I do, he'll be angry with me, he'll be upset, he'll be annoyed with me. And if I don't, you know, God's going to be annoyed with me. And I had this thing of offending God or offending this priest. And the power he had over me really showed in the fact that I just said nothing. I chose rather to have God angry with me. I know it's very hard for people to understand, but that changed my whole view, my whole idea of myself. I started from that point to think, I'm a really, really bad person. Mary Collins is a really very bad person, and I've got to keep this secret. That really led to a lifetime of very severe depressions. For a child that everything was bright and everything was colourful and fun, the world had turned grey.
I was born and raised Roman Catholic. Everybody in my family is a descendant of Irish Roman Catholicism. I received my first assignment as a monk to follow in the footsteps of another monk and replace him that same day when he was pulled out because he had sexually abused a child. All my assignments from that point forward were to follow troubles of different monks who had abused children. Yeah, I was a company man. My major role was to smooth the waters and to make as much of the scandal go away as possible. I had been hearing confessions for a number of years of diocesan clergy, so I knew that there was an ongoing problem and it wasn't going away. And I really couldn't do a whole lot about it. So that's when I left. That's when I left the monastery, that's when I left priesthood. Basically, the church will get a confidential report from either the parent, from a teacher, from the child themselves. And then they will tell that person, for the good name of the church, you must remain silent. And as an obedient Catholic, they remain silent. They eat the pain, they put it down, and they put it deep into their soul and make it go away.
This one here is a happier one. This is my husband and I on our wedding day, Ray and I. And, 25 years after the abuse, I was sent to a psychoanalyst, and he spoke to me about my childhood, and whatever way he dealt with the sessions, the story of the abuse then did come out. And I went to my local priest and I told him, I wanted to tell him that I had been abused by the chaplain as a child in hospital, and I wanted to give him the name so that he could pass it on to his superiors and make sure this man was taken out of a position of trust with children. He turned around and said, oh, well, don't give me all the details because it was probably your fault. And then he followed that up by telling me I was forgiven. It's just impossible to describe how the effect that had on me. I had spent 25 years thinking it was my fault. But I just felt like shattered and all the little pieces were falling down in a heap. It took another 10 years before I could bring myself to go back and report it again. Father Brendan Smith's case came up in the papers, and he was a very prolific paedophile here and in America. Because often they didn't only send their abusing priests to other parishes, they sent them to other countries. But when his case came into the papers, somehow the realization got through to me that this man could still be doing this, and it wasn't just me, that I had to go and try again. And I went and reported him to the Archbishop at the time, Archbishop Desmond Connell. And I said, this man is an abuser, a child abuser. You've got to take him out of the parish where he has access to children. He said, you can't ruin his life. He didn't care he'd ruin my life, ruin 30 plus years of my life.
If you can get into the priest's files, it's going to take you years of litigation and a lot of money to fight it out. But when you get the records speak for themselves. This was just not a single problem, that this was one after another after another. Irish Church goes way back, obviously, to St. Patrick. And, you know, being one of the strongest Catholic countries in the world, Ireland was able, over the years, to export well over 4,000 priests to the United States. And some of them did wonderful work. But a good percentage of them, the clergy that came to the United States from Ireland, went on to abuse children.
I have a brother who is a priest in the United States. My uncle was a priest in the United States. They were ordinary people who went with a one-way ticket. And that style was replicated in dioceses all over the United States. And until 1970, half of the priests of Los Angeles were Irish.
There were a number of things going on. The American church was in real need to have priests, because you can't operate a diocese, you can't operate these parishes without a priest. So they were willing to go out and give guys second and third and fourth chances. What's also going on is there is code language within the church that is just understood. A priest can be given a good bill of health on paper, but the communication still happens that watch out for this particular guy. He needs to be put with a senior priest to help him grow as a priest.
But, as the Murphy report shows, priests who had abused in Ireland were sometimes given glowing reviews.
I cannot comment on an individual letter that was sent by an individual person to some other individual, but I can tell you that the same values that we are teaching to our seminarians today are based on what Christ taught us. It is a message of love. It's not a message of what can you get away with.
Many of the priests who became paedophiles were first abused themselves, like Father Oliver O'Grady.
How old were you when that priest abused you?
12, and that would be a guess. I was an altar server. I think what makes me sad is that I didn't develop a better, more mature way of understanding and relating to sexuality.
From the data that's available and from the different counselors I've talked to who specifically had priests loads that they counseled over the years, the vast majority of the guys, their first sexual experience was in seminary with a faculty member. And that completely changes the trajectory of a person's development, of their sexual development, their psychological development, their spiritual development. So as that priest is coming through spiritual direction and he's maturing as a human being and he's coming through the Catholic seminary system, there's that secret that's always there, that's deep there and never dealt with. It means that they basically have a stilted or stunted maturation age. They could have a chronological age of 50, but a maturation age of 15 or 16. And thus, they're attracted to that particular age group.
Like Father Brendan Smith, who was sent to Providence, Rhode Island, after he abused several boys and girls in Ireland. The Diocese of Providence was not told of his past. That's where he met Helen McGonigal when she was only 6 years old.
Our bishop at the time, Bishop McVinney, was of Irish ancestry, and he expressed a need for priests because they had a shortage, and that's how Brendan Smith got sent over. So, and then with Smith being from Ireland, my family being of Irish descent, it was a natural fit for him. I mean, at the moment that the first memory surfaced of actual abuse itself, I was just trying to think and relax and settle down, and that's when it hit me. I've been abused in every way imaginable.
Memories of sodomy, rape, repeated abuse suffered by Helen and her older sister, who eventually committed suicide.
Convicted on 117 counts in Ireland. They've called him the devil. They've called him the Antichrist over there, yeah. And one wonders what consumed him. I mean, if you were to take his photographs over time, and see how he developed from, at first, being someone that a child might want to turn to. He had a nice face, he had an Irish brogue, he had a way about him that could be playful. But over time through his life, I see in the eyes a stone-cold stare that just to me looks as if he was consumed by evil.
When asked to comment, the Catholic Church in Providence sent us this statement. Presently, the Diocese of Providence is defending 2 lawsuits involving allegations surrounding abuse by Father Smith, including a lawsuit brought by Helen McGonigal. In light of this pending litigation, the Diocese of Providence will reserve any additional comments for the appropriate forum. And for the head of Ireland's church, new humiliating confessions.
The Church in Ireland must acknowledge before the Lord and others the serious sins committed against defenceless children.
Cardinal Sean Brady admits he took part in an internal church inquiry of Father Brendan Smith in 1975, where 2 children were forced to take a vow of silence. Critics call for him to resign, but he says he was only taking notes.
It's the pattern, and it can tell any prosecutor, any judge across the world that this is how the church operates. The lesson has been, both from the Middle Ages when you go back into the documents, and from the experiences in the 1950s and 1960s. Ultimately, if the psychic infirmity exists in that priest, he's not going to be able to stop himself.
One of those priests, 82-year-old Father Francis Markey, was just arrested in South Bend, Indiana, 30 years after he was sent from Ireland to a church-run treatment center for clerical sex abusers in America.
Francis had abused several times in Ireland, and he's in treatment, and then for some odd reason at that point, they turned Francis loose. He found his way to several places that are completely unexplainable. They got him to a small little place where no one would have any idea, and he would be accepted.
Father Markey will soon be extradited to face charges that 40 years ago he raped a young boy in Ireland just after his father's funeral. And allegations are also surfacing in parishes he briefly passed through in the United States.
He didn't rape me, but what he did, he wanted to. He was attempting it, and I assumed that he'd been in jail and likely had died. And I was very surprised to see he had just been arrested recently and still denying basically everything. How did he evade justice that long? Who helped him?
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Mass, the first Mass of the day on Ash Wednesday. How many children were abused? Thousands. Thousands and thousands of them. Going back, going back centuries. A priest appointed by the Archdiocese, who they knew had abused in at least 2 other parishes before. They sent him here under the blind stupidity or idiocy, thinking that it wouldn't happen again, and it did.
Do you have any sense of guilt, or do you have any sense of shame?
And in doing that, they endangered every single solitary young guy in this parish.
I mean, the kids are scarred for life, Children are scarred for life, and anything like that happens to them. Don't they, they didn't do enough here. And we had a priest here that was abusing the boys, and he was shifted to another parish and done the same.
To know that the church knew about it and was just moving people on from A to B and not telling anyone in this community that they were sending a known child rapist to them as their priest. And that's the hardest probably for the people here in the pews to cope with.
I'm angry.
Sure you are. Do you think the Pope is angry?
I think he is, he is, yes. He's angry about what happened. and he wants to, you know, and again, you know, to see how is it that people who are intelligent and even good people, you know, got this wrong. And there was nobody was going around saying this is an invention of somebody else. You know, these facts happened in the diocese, which I have a pastoral responsibility. You know, up to probably 2,000 children were abused, and you know that is it's a horrendous thing.
It was Archbishop Martin who released 70,000 sealed files and fully cooperated with Judge Murphy's inquest. This week he dropped another bombshell, publicly calling for the secrets to be opened in every diocese in Ireland.
And bring the thing into the open. I think there's you know, the openness with which people can now talk about the sexual abuse of children is a very important thing, and it's probably done a huge amount of good in the church and in society in general.
Thank you very much.
We have an archbishop in Dublin who is doing things right. He has put in proper child protection measures. The problem is the other 25 bishops in Ireland have no time for him, because as far as they're concerned, he's betraying the church. They are living, if not 1 century, 2 centuries in the past.
I want to make it quite clear that there is no disunity among the Irish bishops concerning the importance of safeguarding of children.
We all know that there's great anger out there, and it's richly deserved. We haven't handled this crisis well by any means, so the anger is richly deserved. We accept that, we understand that.
The Vatican itself at one stage said this is an Irish problem, and I know because we exported priests to America, there seems to be more Irish priests who are abusers. But we're now seeing it coming up in Brazil and Germany and other countries. Some country has to be the first one to pull away the veil and show what's been going on.
Today is a very historic day for the Catholics of Ireland. Pope Benedict has written a pastoral letter to express his closeness to us at this challenging time. The first group he addresses are the victims of abuse. Pope Benedict acknowledges that when many survivors were courageous enough to speak of what happened to them, no one would listen. To us bishops, he says, we must admit that grave errors of judgment were made and failures of leadership occurred. The Holy Father offers very stern words to priests and religious who have abused children. Openly acknowledge your guilt, he says. Submit yourselves to the demands of justice, but do not despair of God's mercy.
This is my body, which will be given up for all of you. Over the altar, behind us there's a mosaic of a pelican. The myth of the pelican is it will take flesh from itself to feed its young. It's an image of Christ, the sacrifice of Christ for the people he loved. And that's the model of church we should have. A crow will, to protect itself, when food or resources are scarce, it'll eat the young of its own species. Our church has sacrificed its young, it has sacrificed its parishes, and appears almost to be prepared to sacrifice anything so that the institution is protected. So the model we have is not the pelican, it's a big black crow.
The cover-up by the church is horrendous. The sexual morality put forward by the church, and the Irish church specifically, was horrible. But we're getting free now because we're finding out the truth, we're finding out the whole story, and there shouldn't be any fear in that, because at the end of the day, there's a great, tremendous, powerful culture and a tremendous faith there, no matter how bad the institution is.